This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Into the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but here at Locked On. I'm your host, Denitra Batiste, alongside me, our Falcons analyst, Jarvis Davis, Locked On Falcons host, Aaron Freeman, and senior Falcons reporter Tori McElhaney. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So the Atlanta Football Party, of course, is also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Creating separation can be a good thing. We'll discuss. And are the Falcons hedging their bets too much on any players from the 2025 free agency class? We'll download on that. Also, is there a free agent out there who the Falcons should take a good look at? We'll talk about that too. But first, let's try to dig into the mind of Terry Fontenot. So ESPN's Jeremy Fowler said Friday that Jaire Alexander, who ended up signing with the Ravens, did consider the Falcons before settling on Baltimore. Now, of course, we know two-time Pro Bowler, but we also know he's injury prone. That said, Jarvis, what does not signing Alexander maybe say about Terry Fontenot's mindset on continuing to shape this defense and this Falcons secondary for 2025?
Well, to me, it tells me that, hey, he's going for it, like, because the goal is obviously to get back to the playoffs, right? So I think that whatever person can come in and, help this team out, he's going to go after him. He's not just going to broadcast it to everyone, because, I wasn't aware that the Falcons were in on him. So for Jeremy Fowler, for that report to come out and say, hey, he considered Atlanta, being able to, that kind of tells me that, Terry is in a space where he was like, blank that first round pick in 2026. I'm going to get me 2 pass rushers now. And the other piece that I like about it is I really like the fact that, Jaire Alexander wasn't sought out because he wouldn't be to be the savior, because that's what we saw last offseason, right? When we were talking about, bringing in a guy, bringing in guys like, Justin Simmons, and they were like, oh, yeah, this is going to be the guy that's going to be able to get him in, and then Matthew Judon as well. So I think that, dang, I said his name. Dog it.
You done so well before this.
I know I have been doing so well, but yeah, those guys were looked at as the saviors for the defense. Oh, yeah, this is going to make everything all good. But Jaire was kind of looked at, all right, okay, maybe he'll be good to add, but we're pretty much cool with the guys that we have in our secondary. In our secondary, we feel like our secondary can do really well with all the young pups that we added up front to help those guys out on the back end.
So, Aaron, for you, when you look at not signing Alexander, but pursuing him possibly, according to the reports, what does that maybe say to you about Terry Fontenot's mindset as far as continuing to shape the defense, shape the secondary for 2025?
Well, first I'd like to say that, this Jaire Alexander got to choose whether he signed with the Falcons. This is not like, oh, the Falcons were going to sign Jaire Alexander, and then they were like, no, we're not going to sign Jaire. And it's like, okay, I guess I'll go to Baltimore. So he had some agency in this. So I don't want to.
Aaron, you just have to burst the bubble.
I'm just saying, like, I don't want people to get it twisted. That people don't frame it like, oh, the Falcons chose not to sign Jaire Alexander. Like he gets to choose where he goes. That's the whole point of being a free agent. But that being said, I think it's a good thing that the Falcons chose not to sign Jaire Alexander, because I think the issue with Jaire Alexander, he's a good player when he's healthy. The problem is, like, he's not healthy very often, and like you would have to reshuffle your entire secondary. You would have probably plugged him in as an outside corner. You probably would have moved Mike Hughes to nickel corner. And then, like, for me, like a lot of the Falcons pursuing veterans this summer, which it will inevitably come up, but like at a lot of these positions, like cornerback, where you have some young players that you want to see what they have, and the main one being Billy Bowman at that nickel cornerback spot. And if you sign Jaire Alexander and Mike Hughes moves inside to the nickel cornerback spot, like, what is Billy Bowman doing this year? Like, what's his job? And so, like, I think a big part of this upcoming season, and so I'm happy that the Falcons chose not to sign Jaire Alexander, but I think a big part of this season is trying to get a long look at some of these young players. We did not get that opportunity last year, either by choice or circumstance, depending on what you feel about why the 2024 draft class did not play a ton last year. And I feel like the Falcons cannot make that same mistake in 2025. They really need to get a long look at all these rookies, maybe minus Jack Nelson, this upcoming season. And signing Jaire Alexander, I think, would have prevented them from getting a longer look at Billy Bowman. Now I think he has a golden opportunity to win that nickel cornerback spot. I don't think that would have been the case had the Falcons signed Jaire Alexander and moved Mike Hughes inside. And so, I think this is ultimately potentially a good thing, assuming that they get good play out of, Mike Hughes and Billy Bowman this upcoming season at those two cornerback spots opposite AJ Terrell.
Yeah, and for you, Tori, when you look at the possibility that maybe Jaire Alexander could have been a Falcon, but to Aaron's point, ultimately he decided to be a different sort of bird. What do you think more so about the fact that there was a possibility Terry Fontenot and company were going after him, and how that mindset maybe tells you Terry's thought process on shaping the defense and the secondary for this season?
I think to Free's point, which I agree with, it does have this shade of the Justin Simmons, Matthew Judon moves, which came after key injuries to DeMarco Hellams and Braylon Trice. I know that Terry Fontenot and Raheem Morris said that those guys were on their radar well before those injuries, but I do believe that those injuries made things move a lot quicker and made the necessity to bring those guys in become more heightened. And I feel like with Jaire Alexander, there's a little shades to that. I think that having conversations throughout, mandatory minicamp or OTAs or however long they've been having conversations, I think it was kind of on the back burner that, hey, if things aren't really working out the way that we want them to with Billy Bowman Jr., with having Mike Hughes outside, perhaps there's an opportunity for us to take a step in the right direction. Perhaps that's also what's happening here is that was kind of okay, we'll see if this is something that we want to go and do. But for the most part, feeling confident in perhaps honestly what you have in Billy Bowman Jr., because Free's right in the domino effect of what that would be. And it would be to Billy Bowman Jr.'s, there's a potential that if you get Jaire Alexander, you don't see Billy Bowman Jr. unless there's an injury. So I do think that it all goes back to what Raheem Morris said. Gosh, this was pretty shortly after the draft about being super intentional about playing rookies in 2025, which one was important for him to say because they didn't really do that last year, had a completely different plan for those rookies, regardless of what it was. And now being nope, you're going to see Billy Bowman Jr., you're going to see Xavier Watts, and of course the two, James Pierce Jr. and Jalen Walker. So I think that all plays into this conversation, but I do think that having a veteran guy like Jaire Alexander, if you get to the point of you get to minicamp and you're actually, we don't feel really confident in the grouping that we have right now, we want to add something a little bit more, then you have the potential to go out and get him. While kind of having already had those conversations about what it would take to get him to Atlanta. But I do think it speaks probably to the comfortability of what they feel in the secondary at this point in time, where they didn't feel that it was all too necessary to bring him in.
Yeah, and I think you guys all make some valid points about the fact that, as Jarvis mentioned, it's good to know that Terry's still out there looking for that top talent, if the top talent is available and if the top talent fits. But to Aaron's point as well, what does that mean for that 2025 rookie class? And honestly, Tori, as you mentioned too, what does it mean for 2024? Not necessarily in the secondary per se, but just lesson learned that if there are opportunities for these young players, as I like to call 2024 rookie class 2.0, if there's an opportunity for those players, you got to give it to them so that you can actually see what it is that your last couple of draft classes can be. So the Falcons signed, speaking of that last draft class, they did release one of the players from 2024, Jace McClellan. Falcons signed running back Jashaun Corbin, who, of course, led the UFL in rushing yards during the 2025 season. Aaron, for you, what do you like about Corbin complementing the running back room?
Well, I think he adds a little bit of juice to that room, right? The reason why he led the UFL in rushing is because he was the most explosive runner in that league this past spring in terms of generating those like 10, 15-yard runs. And so adding a little bit of juice to that room, you have your grinder and Tyler Allgeier. That's Bijan is your do everything guy, but the one sort of element that has yet to be fully unlocked by Bijan Robinson is that, those explosive runs, those big time runs. And that's sort of the final piece to the puzzle to make him potentially the best back in the NFL. And so you were kind of missing that element, in the event that Bijan doesn't unlock that fully. And I think Jashaun Corbin brings that element potentially to that room, just getting a little bit more juice to sort of complement the skill set of Tyler Allgeier and Bijan Robinson.
Tori, what do you like about what Corbin brings to the table for this Falcons running back room?
I mean, I think it's just like you're always trying to, and I'm going to sound like Terry and Raw when I say this, but like you're always trying to add competition. Like to me, that's what this is. Like he's not going to come in and usurp like Tyler Allgeier or Bijan Robinson, but you need bodies during training camp. You need bodies during the preseason. And if you're someone like Corbin, like you're looking at this as an opportunity to get your feet wet in the NFL to hopefully put a performance together in the preseason that an actual like running back hungry team would be like, oh man, like this person is shining. This is someone we want to go out and get. And then potentially looking at making a 53-man roster elsewhere. Of course, not saying that he doesn't have a shot here in Atlanta, like crazier things have happened. But I think like that's more in line with kind of what's going on here and not necessarily like, oh, like you're adding competition to Bijan and Tyler. Well, kind of, yes, but also this is as much, I think, for Corbin as it is an opportunity for him in getting in the NFL than it is maybe anything else. So I like this move. I think it's a good move. And I'm actually really interested to see what he kind of looks like in the preseason and if there's an opportunity for him somewhere.
Yeah. What about you, Jarvis? What do you like about what Corbin brings to the table potentially for this Falcons run offense?
First thing that comes to mind, can he tackle? Special teams, my brother. That's how you're going to make
That's where my mind went to. That was one of the things I looked at too. And he played some snaps definitely on special teams and did some things, but go ahead.
But in all seriousness though, I think that's the main thing that he has to focus on. Like when you talk about having a guy like Bijan, who's like Free mentioned, all world, and then Tyler Allgeier, the hammer, he's bringing that. So we understand the two back situation that the Falcons have. So for him, how he fits in, I will be knocking on Marquise Williams' door. Hey, coach, what you got for me today? That's going to be the way he gets into this roster, and especially like when you talk about having that tandem already set, and then with Jace McClellan, it just kind of speaks to what he brought to the table and what he didn't bring to the table. Because if he wasn't necessarily a special teams guy, and he wasn't necessarily the explosive back. He wasn't necessarily the guy that can do all things when Bijan is down. Maybe if he goes down, because, God forbid, Armageddon happens in the running back room and Bijan gets hurt and Tyler Allgeier gets hurt. We really think Jason McCullough going to be able to step in there? Jashaun Corbin might be able to do that. You know what I'm saying? Because he's done it, on a professional level. Now, granted, it's the UFL. That's a total different ball game, but he has the ability to be that lead back, in a system, a professional system. So that's what you look for. And then the whole special team piece as well. So yeah, that's how he's going to make this squad.
Yeah. And that's exactly what his coach said. His coach Peyton Pardee tweeted a couple days ago when the announcement was made that, hey, he is a do-it-all running back. Yes, pass pro. Yes, rushing. Yes, receiving, but also very much a special guy on special teams for his play in the UFL. So yeah, maybe that's that guy who gives you sort of that all-purpose guy. Whom I think about, Avery Williams. He reminds me of kind of, that space where we saw Avery kind of make his mark for the Falcons a couple seasons ago. So we'll see how it goes. But creating separation, we talked about competition. Creating separation through competition might be a good thing. We'll talk about that when we take it under further review. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or you're placing a same-game parlay, rather, because I'm really hoping that you do this, or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, which is a good look because we've seen how many walk-offs this season. FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action, makes you feel like you're part of the action. So are you new to FanDuel? Well, customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. So open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So, Tori, we started this conversation last week talking more on the defensive side of the ball. Let's switch gears to offense and special teams, and kind of teed this conversation up even in the first segment, where we know that minicamp sort of only shows you signs sometimes of how players might be able to separate themselves, but it may give you a clue of how they're going to separate themselves during training camp, or maybe what you even want to see from each position group overall. So we'll start with the quarterback. And again, not so much that we're looking for separation between who's going to be QB1 and QB2. But Tori, it might be for QB1 some nuanced things that you're looking to see that tell you that Michael Penix Jr. is continuing to build, or you might have your eye on Kirk Cousins. How does he manage through a training camp where he's QB2 and he's going to stay QB2? So for you, let's start with that position group.
Yeah, I mean, it's both of those conversations happening simultaneously. Mm-hmm. And I've said it before on this show. I'll say it again. We're going to continue to talk about Kirk Cousins until we're not. And who knows when that's going to be. So how Kirk manages his own expectations and his own ability to, as in his words, like be a good teammate to Michael Penix Jr. And kind of not take away from Michael Penix Jr. and the development that he needs to see as the starter, as quarterback number one for this team, I think is going to be interesting to see. I kind of agree with what everybody's been saying. It's like Kirk Cousins is not in the business of getting in the way of Michael Penix Jr.'s development. Like that's not what's going to happen. I do think Kirk is just going to quietly work as himself and kind of continue to show that, hey, if there's a quarterback hungry team out there, there's a quarterback ready to go in Atlanta. So go and get him. So I think that's what this time can be for Kirk. As for Michael Penix, it's just continuing to, I think, hone in on the little things about running this offense. And what I mean by that is maybe the moments that don't have the explosives. And we're not looking at him stretching the field vertically with the arm strength that we know he has, but kind of the touch of some of these over the middle throws. And I think that's something that being able to intake what he needs to be able to do in a moment that doesn't necessarily mean a lot of flash, even though we know he's a flashy guy on the field, but how does he manage kind of the minutia parts of running the offense and the little things and the communication, like all of those things I think are where you would see the most growth from Michael Penix Jr. in going into this year. I'm actually curious to see what the plan will be for the Falcons in the preseason, considering how many young players they have and how much new they have. I actually do think, I know Raheem Morris has said, for a very long time that he does not believe in playing starters in the preseason. I think because of the situation that you're in at this point in time, especially defensively, but also the fact that you do have Michael Penix as a quarterback and you have Ryan Newsel as your starting center. Like, I do think some more live reps would be beneficial for this group. And maybe we could see the Falcons changing their tune a little bit to potentially see some of these guys play in the preseason. We'll see, put a little asterisk beside that. But that's kind of my biggest question about, how do they handle going into the preseason with Kirk and with Michael, and do we see both Kirk and Michael playing some series for the Falcons in the preseason. I mean, I think that's my question going into where things stand come August.
I kind of like that last part that you went with, Tori, like with MPX, with Cousins. How much will we actually see them in the preseason? And my mind kind of went to two things. Number one, like you said, we'll get an opportunity to see a guy who only had 3 games to show his stuff last season. So you do kind of need him to get just a little bit more of a ramp up than maybe you would want out of him in the preseason. And then for Kirk Cousins, wouldn't be a bad look for him as far as where his next move might be, if he's not already gone already, because we know what we've seen happen throughout training camp and even in 2024, but 2023 most definitely. So Aaron, for you, when you kind of look at that quarterback room, you know, like we said, what are maybe some of the things you kind of saw a sneak peek of maybe in mandatory mini camp that said, okay, this is how I want to see some things stack up in training camp for Cousins for MPX?
Well, I'm in a much better mood now because Tori suggested that we might actually see some starters in the preseason. So I will.
Thank you, T.
I will.
I do what I can.
That, that will give me hope for like the next 2 months that we will actually be able to watch these preseason games and be like, ooh, someone who's actually going to play this year on the team is actually playing in one of these games. I will say this to answer your question, T. I was talking to Tori's colleague Will McFadden a couple of weeks ago. And a point he brought up that I had not thought of because I had basically been like, I don't want to talk about Kirk Cousins the rest of the offseason, is that Kirk Cousins playing with the second string is going to help all those second string wide receivers get better. That playing with a professional quarterback like Kirk Cousins will benefit all of those guys. And so that is something I am somewhat intrigued by going into training camp. Do we see a big jump forward for some of these backup players? We know what the Falcons have in Drake London and Darnell Mooney and Ray McLeod and whatnot, and to a lesser extent, maybe Kadero Hodge. But what do the Falcons have in Casey Washington, Chris Blair, some of these undrafted free agents, Nick Nash and whatnot? And if those guys are getting more opportunities with a quarterback like Kirk Cousins, as opposed to an Easton Stick or Emory Jones in some of these training camp practices, I do think that will be beneficial to them. So I think sort of the trickle-down effects of having a reshuffled quarterback lineup with Penix at the top and Kirk Cousins working with the second string could benefit some of these other positions. So that's something that's intriguing to me when it comes to the quarterback position. Because again, we don't know what we have in Michael Penix, but we believe that what the Falcons have in him is, their potential franchise quarterback. We know what Kirk Cousins is going to be. So as Tori said, there is some intrigue involved in sort of whether or not the Falcons are going to unveil more of Penix during the summer before we get to the regular season. But in terms of those guys, I'm pretty much good with what those guys are going to be. Hopefully, Penix will get a very long leash this upcoming season to sort of develop into the type of quarterback that he is. We know what Kirk Cousins is going to be. So to me, it's the intrigue around the quarterback position is kind of how does it affect the other positions, and particularly that wide receiver room and some of the depth that the Falcons have there.
Yeah, I like that cosign, Aaron, because you're absolutely right. That's one of those embarrassment of riches situations that is unconventional, because we talk about depth in other position groups and how that can be advantageous for the Falcons. This one, of course, was an unconventional way to have quality depth in the quarterback room. But yeah, that's a nice kind of angle, if you will, for lack of a better term, that Will kind of pointed out that you highlighted there as well, as far as what it could be for Kirk Cousins and what he can do in other ways to kind of help players along for the Falcons. So for you, Jarvis, kind of what are you looking at as far as little things that can be incremental builds for Michael Penix from what you saw in mini camp to what you think you'll see in training camp, but also maybe Kirk Cousins?
For as far as MPX goes, I think for me, I'm interested to see when does he reach that level of confidence that to say to Zach Robinson, like, Coach, you know what? I think we should go with this. Or I'm more comfortable with this as they're getting ready to, as far as they're going through the game plan phase for week 1. When does he reach that level of comfort? Is it week 1? Is it week 5? Is it week 6? I just wanted to, because once you get to a point as a player, you understand the system enough, you understand what you're trying to do against opposing defenses on a weekly basis, you get to the point where, like, okay, here's how teams are starting to play me, now that the film is out. So I like X play and X play in this particular situation because I know where I'm going. I know what they're going to be in as far as from a coverage standpoint, and I know how to attack it. Like I know Drake is going to be backside man coverage, right? So it's going to be a 9-to-5 type situation and on 3rd and long, right? So all of those things, that's what I'm looking for him as far as, okay, how can he, get to that level of comfort? Is it Zach Robinson saying, hey man, let me know what you like and what you don't like, or is it just a matter of he gets a good feel for it? He plays a little bit in the preseason because, hey, I like what we did. I know we were being very vanilla against this team, or so. Yeah, I want to be able to work this once the season gets rolling, because Tampa plays very similar to whatever team they played in the preseason. So yeah, that's what I'm looking for. As far as Kirk goes, I think I'm already cool with what Kirk is mentally, because I think he said it best. He was like, hey, man, I'm not going to be another voice in this guy's ear. You know what I'm saying? I think he's just there to be a resource for MPX as he goes through his first full season as a starter. And I think that's all I can ask for a guy like Kirk. And to be honest with you, I'm not surprised. Like, Kirk he's a true pro. He's just a professional. And I think that until his opportunity comes, he understands, like, hey, man, the reality is I'm QB2 until someone gets hurt. And not that you're hoping for somebody to get hurt, but hey, if that were to happen, I'm rocking and rolling. And I'm like Torrey too. So if you were injured and all this stuff, like, how healthy are you? Like, so is he going to get a couple series, go take a little touchdown drive, and then they put him up and put him in bubble wrap until somebody like, hey man, look at this film, Kirk is ready to go. So are they gonna try to market him? So those are some of the things that I can start to think about when it comes to Kirk and where he is. But I think mentally, though, I think he's in the perfect space.
Yeah, and we kind of touched on this before in talking about Corbin, but ultimately wanted to real quick go back and give you guys an opportunity in case you wanted to add in terms of what you're looking for, with some little nuances, maybe some new wrinkles, Tori, that you saw with Bijan Robinson, where you're like, I want to see what that kind of plays out, how that plays out in training camp, or even for Tyler Allgeier.
Yeah. So for Bijan specifically, I do think that something that came up a lot is they're wanting him to be more explosive. We know what Bijan can do in terms of his ability to make people miss. I mean, I would say he's top 3 in the league and being able to do that. What he can do to make people miss is very special. But what's different about Bijan compared to the Saquon Barkleys of the world, the Jahmyr Gibbs, is there hasn't been this level of explosive runs over 30, 40 yards. Like, I believe, if I'm remembering off the top of my head, Bijan's longest run last year was only 36 yards, which I know we're only saying only 36 yards, but when you compare it to some other running backs across the league, like who are like a Saquon, who are having explosives constantly, I think that's where the coaching staff specifically, and Bijan too, are wanting to take his game to the next level and kind of making it to where he's making these moves that we see him make up against the safety, not maybe 5 yards behind the safety. So where he's not slowing down enough to let someone grab him from behind. I think that's a very easy, simple tweak that they're looking to make with Bijan going into this year. And then quickly about Tyler Allgeier, it's continuing to show that he is this little bowling ball of a runner that you can just rely on, and you don't have any worries about. He's protecting the ball. He's getting you those dirty, gritty yards. He's running over people. He's making the run game hard to defend late in games, because as Michael Petrie has said over and over, if you're a defender, you have to make a business decision in the fourth quarter. If you're down by a significant amount, like, and Tyler Allgeier is running with a full head of steam at you, what are you going to do? Like, are you kind of going to like shuffle a little bit? Or are you going to take that hit full on? So I think for Tyler Allgeier, it's him continuing to be who he is and play his game, and what that will mean for Tyler Allgeier now that this is his last year on his rookie contract. The Falcons have to make a decision. Tyler Allgeier has to make a decision next offseason. And I do think he deserves a shot to be kind of a big dog on the free agency market, and for what he's been able to do with the Falcons throughout his rookie contract. So that's where things stand, I think, with those two. It's Bijan, it's getting more explosive and timing his moves a little bit, better, for lack of a better word, even though that's not, we're nitpicking somebody's game.
Right.
Tyler Allgeier, it's continuing to showcase why he deserves potentially a big contract coming out of this season.
Yeah. What about you, Aaron, when you look at Bijan, Tyler, and what you've seen so far? Nuances to kind of see, I don't want to say separate themselves, maybe see them move to the next level as they approach training camp.
Yeah, I said this all last year. I had no notes on what Bijan Robinson and Tyler Allgeier were doing last year. It was like, all my criticism for the Falcons was like everybody else on the team. Like, you two, you're doing great. Like, don't read the thing that you're doing.
Don't touch them.
Right. And so like it's just like really like nitpicky, subtle things. Like, as Tori said, like, one of the selling points when the Falcons drafted Bijan Robinson was like, oh, all those 40-yard runs that we saw from Tyler Allgeier his rookie year, Bijan's going to turn those into like 60 and 80-yard runs. And we just haven't seen that manifest itself. And it's just like, okay, let's just get like one of those. And then once that ball gets rolling, then, we're off to the races on that. And as I said earlier, like, that's literally like the final piece in the puzzle. Like, you did this 1,000-piece puzzle and there's one piece missing. And you're like, man, once we complete this puzzle, like, I just got to find this one piece. It's really annoying me that we haven't found this one piece. But overall, like, you get the gist of sort of what the puzzle is showing. And so that's the final piece of the puzzle, Bijan being like the best running back in the NFL. And then with Tyler Allgeier, just, keep doing you, keep mashing dudes in the face, keep not fumbling. If the Falcons are going to ask you maybe to play a little bit more special teams this year, continue to bring that linebacker mentality that you have from college, in that role, as well as at the running back position. So again, it's very, very few notes on, what Bijan and Tyler Allgeier need to continue to work on. They're doing great.
I'm just intrigued by the fact that I think Aaron kind of tipped his hand and told us he likes putting together puzzles and he's pretty darn good at it. So Jarvis, what about you with Bijan and Tyler?
I think for me, it's just fully understanding what their roles are, right? And I think that's defined by Michael Petrie, who is a very intense man, by the way. Michael Petrie is a straight shooter. And I when I was talking to him, when I had a conversation with him earlier in the spring, it was just because I'm fascinated by conversations and then the mental games that you have to play, not necessarily games, but the mental truths that you have to tell, to players. And I think that Michael Petrie like really laid it out. Like when he first got to Chicago, he had to have some really grown man conversations. Like you go from the college level and into the pros, like 18 to 22 versus this man might be 35 and got 2 kids at home and married, So it's just a different a different level of conversation or being able to communicate, that you have to have in order for those guys to understand exactly what their role is and what you need to do in order to stay on this squad. So I think that, Tyler, he has a pretty good case to be a number 2 back. Like he like, oh man, how did I end up here? Like I got the rushing record, rookie rushing record. You know what I'm saying? I'm over William Andrews. You know what I'm saying? Like ain't nobody heard of William Andrews in 20, 30 years, So for him to kind of be able to say, all right, I understand what y'all got going on with Bijan, and Michael Petrie has laid that out. And for him to say, all right, I'm going into a contract year, like Tori mentioned, I got the opportunity to be paid. It might not be here, but oh my gosh, he can have a very similar track to Michael Turner. I know that might be blasphemy in some people's eyes, but just from a standpoint of being in a multi-back system and then getting the opportunity to go somewhere else and start and then having a really solid career, I think Tyler Allgeier is on track for that. As long as he continues to understand, like, hey, this is my role right now, and then this is, if I understand the whole team goal is to be able to get to the playoffs and do what we need to do, shoot, everybody gonna get paid.
Yeah, and I don't think it's blasphemy when Michael Vick puts those high level and high compliments out there in terms of what this running back room, this wide receiver room, and even the QB room look like relative to some of the quote unquote glory days from the Falcons. And yeah, I think that after what we saw in the market, even listening, we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes, but even listening to some commentary on a J.K. Dobbins and how things are going to reset for him this season potentially, and then seeing what Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry were able to do last season to help reset the market for running backs, I absolutely think that you're right, Jarvis. Tyler Allgeier, and Tori, you said it as well. He's in a position where he could make the case for him to be RB1, even if it's somewhere else. Now, are the Falcons hedging their bets too much on any of the players from this 2025 free agency class of pickups so far? We'll discuss that when we run it back. So, Aaron, pickups for this free agency class may be a little bit different from 2024, just in terms of what the excitement and the buildup was when you think about like a Justin Simmons, or you think about a number 15. Jarvis, is that okay if I just say number 15?
15 is great. Yeah.
Okay, 15. We'll roll with 15 just to make Jarvis happy. But when you think about that class versus maybe this class, because there were moments where I think some of us would say, when we found out, okay, and I think some people even still say this, like a divine Deablo, who is that? What does he bring to the table? Not really as familiar with his game, for example, or a Leonard Floyd, more familiar with his game, but not quite sure what he's going to bring at this stage of his career. What got me thinking about it is this. I think I told you guys pre-show, I had a long 6-hour drive last night to think about a whole bunch of things and listen to a whole bunch of shows. And one of the shows was talking about a particular team that is hedging all of its bets on these 4 free agent pickups, high profile, but also injury prone, some challenges, a little bit off the field, et cetera, and whether or not that team is putting itself in a precarious position, because unlike the NFC South, that team is actually in a division where all 4 teams have the potential to make the playoffs. So I was like, I wonder what you guys think about the Falcons free agents and if this team has done the same. So, Aaron, I'll ask you this question. I'll start with you. Is there a player or any players you feel the Falcons picked up in free agency this year that maybe you're concerned about? They're maybe betting on too much to have a bounce back year or contribute too much to the success of this team?
Well, before the draft, I probably would have answered this question with Leonard Floyd because of the whole number 15 debacle, if you want to say, just because a lot of the same quote unquote issues with Leonard Floyd being a very productive player for many, many years. But there were some indicators of maybe the production as an individual pass rusher was not quite what it was, despite the sack production, very similar to the pass rusher that shall go nameless that the Falcons picked up last August. And so prior to the draft, I was like, are the Falcons putting too much stock in Leonard Floyd, which is they're kind of making a similar decision. I won't say mistake because it hasn't played out yet, but a similar decision as they made with the previous guy that was a veteran player at the same age. And there's a lot of evidence that says around that age, guys start to drop off. But then the Falcons drafted James Pierce and Jalen Walker. And so they're not putting as much stock on Leonard. Like Leonard Floyd's not having to carry this pass rush in the ways that his predecessor kind of had to carry the Falcons pass rush, because you didn't have as much young talent in that edge room. And so for me, Leonard Floyd was the answer to this question, but then the draft happened. And so therefore, like, I don't know if there's a player that the Falcons are putting too much or betting too much on having that sort of bounce back year, or, you know, being asked to carry the burden. I still think there are certain players that, and we'll see if Tori and Jarvis, you know, name some of these guys that, you know, maybe are question marks, but like in terms of just like putting a little bit too much on or feeling like this is a quote unquote bad bet. I don't think there's a player like that to me out of this group now that the Falcons have kind of hedged their Leonard Floyd bet with James Pierce and Jalen Walker.
You know, Tori, I kind of feel the same way as Aaron. I think it's a good look that we're not. I mean, it was fun and it was fine at the beginning of the season when we were like, oh my God, Matthew Judon and Justin Simmons, like it's about to be a defense. Like the Falcons are finally going to get out of, I don't know if I want to even call it sack purgatory. Maybe it was just sack hell straight up. But I think that ultimately speaking, maybe this more even-keeled, more balanced situation where all the cards are not stacked in, especially in the deck of, as Aaron mentioned, free agents who are a little bit longer in the tooth. I think that might be a good thing for the Falcons, that they're not hedging their bets the way this other team that I was talking to you guys about they're doing. And there's some concern about whether or not those 4 high-profile free agents can pull it off for them.
Yeah, I think we're in a completely different set of circumstances than the Falcons were, let's say, when they brought in Jesse Bates, Caden Ellis, David Onyemata a couple of years ago. Like bringing in Leonard Floyd, Divine Deablo, like these were a bit more of, I think, pointed signings to the point of like, they're not like, you needed Jesse Bates to be Jesse Bates, and he's been Jesse Bates. But do you necessarily need Leonard Floyd to go out and get you 10 sacks? To Aaron's point, I don't necessarily think you do if you have Jalen Walker, James Pierce Jr., Braylon Trice, Arnold Ebiketie, like all ascending in their young careers. So there is just a different set of circumstances. But I do want to make mention to Divine Deablo, because I do think he is a free agent that is in a very interesting position, because I think that he is the one that you can rely on pretty heavily. And I think the coaching staff has found over OTAs and mandatory minicamp that they are relying on Divine Deablo a bit. I know even Raheem Morris talks about, like, he's a guy who can get the green dot, and he can maybe do a little bit more than perhaps the Falcons even thought when they signed him originally, which is interesting because like he's a Jeff Ulbrich archetype inside linebacker through and through. He has the speed. He has kind of the ability to drop into space and drop into coverage. And so I think that he's someone who can honestly like make a subtle difference in what could potentially happen for this front seven and what it could potentially open up for Caden Ellis specifically. And we know how much Caden Ellis matters to this pass rush. So even at the inside linebacker level, I think we're all talking about the same issues, like getting after the quarterback, and how Divine Deablo frees up Caden Ellis would be not even like a bounce back for Divine Deablo, but establishing himself as a important piece of this defense and potentially an important conversation piece for the league at large.
What I like about it, Tori, and what I like about it, Jarvis, is it's a little bit of a different, if you're kind of looking at a chart or a graphic, if you will, where you expected at a minimum for Matthew Judon or even a Justin Simmons to come in and either stay here or ascend. You just didn't want him to drop off the chart, if you will. And I feel like maybe, but there was such high expectations for those two guys. I feel like maybe Deablo will kind of be, he's not even kind of be, from what you just said, Tori, he has been more of the sneaky trending up, and that could be good for the Falcons because they may have kind of brought him in saying, okay, we expect him to perform at this level, but to be able to get more out of him, I think is a good way to rely on somebody whom you didn't necessarily think you were going to get that out of in the beginning. But for you, Jarvis, if you're looking at sort of the free agents of 2025 that the Falcons went out and got, do you feel like there's anyone there that makes you concerned? Like, oh man, I think they're looking for way too much in this guy, the way that other team out west kind of did.
If I was thinking about Divine Deablo, but because he had a little bit of down year, he had a career high missed tackles last year, so that might be an issue. You want to make sure that you don't have any issue with that. But the guy that really stands out to me has to be Jordan Fuller, because here's why. I don't want Jordan Fuller to be the guy and then not necessarily be able to stay in that role and he get hurt, because he had some soft tissue injuries, specifically with his hamstring in the past couple of years. So you just like, all right, that's one of those situations where you like you don't want the rookie to be forced into action, so to speak, like Michael Penix last year. Now granted he did well, but the plan is to Jordan Fuller to be the starter until Xavier Watts proves that he can be the guy. So that's my biggest concern. Are the Falcons hedging their bets essentially for Jordan Fuller to be healthy, for an entire season or 6 or 7 games until Xavier Watts proves that he can be the starting safety for them. So that's where my biggest concern lies. Like, all right, Jordan Fuller, solid starter, but is he going to be available? And if he is available to start the season, is he going to be able to remain that way until Watts proves himself or he gets hurt? And if he gets hurt, that's why I feel like the Falcons probably made too big of a bet.
Gotcha. So yeah, speaking of, now there are still a lot of free agents out there. Don't know that the Falcons have a need for them or not, but that's not up to me to decide. It's up to the panel to talk about these best players who are available, and if anyone intrigues you as a legit option that the Falcons should pursue. We'll talk about that when we look ahead. So, Jarvis, of course, it is still list season, and there is still a boatload of quality free agents that are out there. And we talked earlier about a couple of different things. Number one, obviously, Jaire Alexander, and whether or not he was a free agent that the Falcons were good to go, not having pursued, but not actually having acquired. And then we also talked just a few moments ago about some of the free agents that the Falcons have already acquired who could be able, or who could pay some big dividends. But that said, of those free agents who are still out there and available, are there any whom you feel the Falcons should legitimately consider as an option or should legitimately pursue?
Right now, I don't think there is a specific player that they should pursue, barring any, because right now their roster is pretty much set as far as like, okay, we know we have multiple contributors. I'm speaking from the defensive side of football. I think there are a lot of guys that can play, right? There's a lot of talented guys. It's just a matter of, okay, what does those rotations look like up front? You understand that we talked about Deablo, him kind of having a bounce back year from making sure he's, if you get your hands on him, put him on the ground. Those type of things. Caden Ellis, is he going to be freed up by Jeff Ulbrich to be able to get to the quarterback? So, and then the secondary, we talk about Jaire Alexander. Yeah, if they decide not to go that route, or if Jaire said, this is a better situation for me, I'm gonna go to Baltimore, that's cool. You're in that situation is pretty much set. But as far as a guy that they can take a look at that will be a perfect fit and make total sense, I don't think they're in that space right now. I think they're in a space where if someone gets hurt, or if said player is nowhere near what they thought they would be, say a Jordan Fuller, or he comes in, he's hurt, and or Xavier Watts is not necessarily ready. He will be at some point, but he's not necessarily ready right now. That's when I feel like the Falcons should be going through the waiver wire or looking at their free agency list and saying, okay, we need to pinpoint this guy. But as of right now, I don't think they should be even looking at that list at this point.
Free, what about you? There are still a lot of top free agents out there available, but to Jarvis's point, just because they're quality free agents doesn't mean that there's a fit or a need for them for the Falcons. But do you see any that you think, maybe the Falcons should strongly consider bringing that guy in?
Not particularly. The one name on like the NFL.com list of the top remaining free agents that I remember circling at the beginning of the offseason that I was like, I want the Falcons to sign that guy, was Mike Hilton, the nickel cornerback for the Bengals. But going back to what we talked about at the top of the show with, signing Jaire Alexander and sort of the trickle down effect of, bumping Mike Hughes inside and, that potentially eliminating an opportunity for Billy Bowman to get on the field. I as I said then, I feel like the goal of the Falcons should be to see what they have in these rookie players. And as Jarvis said, if we get, a couple weeks into training camp and guys are struggling, then maybe you revisit this and maybe this rookie or that rookie is not as ready to go. Maybe we should be less intentional about playing that guy based off of where he is at this stage in the offseason. And then maybe you revisit some of these veteran guys. But for the time being, I think, as Jarvis said, unless there's an injury, unless one of these rookies or young players that the Falcons are expecting to contribute this year really kind of fall on their face once we get to training camp, I'm not that interested in adding veterans to the roster at this point in time.
Yeah. What about you, T?
Yeah, I'm in the same exact boat. Let's see what the Falcons have right now in terms of, some of these positions, whether it be edge, defensive back, even wide receiver, kind of that number 4, number 5 wide receiver that's trying to make the roster. If there was a tried and true center on this list, perhaps I feel differently about bringing in somebody. I think like that's the one position that I'm a bit concerned that if something happens to Ryan Nuzul, what the Falcons do there. And that's such an important and undervalued position. He touches like a center touches the freaking ball every single play. Like, and I think that putting all of the eggs in the Ryan Nuzul basket is fine for right now, but I do worry about where that goes if you do not have Ryan Nuzul accessible. So that's why I'm a bit, the list is great because it has some of these like big time wide receivers and corners and everything, and edge rushers. I think Clowney is still available. Like, but for me, it's the center position. If there was a veteran center who maybe was even on the older side, like you need a true backup guy in case the worst happens, I would really, really be pushing to get a guy like that in there. But right now, the way the market is, like I'm not really seeing that. So for that reason, I'm fine just kind of letting things lie and seeing how things ultimately shake out, potentially after 53-man roster cut downs, and seeing maybe who falls off of other rosters elsewhere that you could potentially bring in, not even as like, it doesn't even have to be like pure competition, but just kind of making sure you have a safety net at that position is where I'm kind of sitting right now.
Yeah. Jarvis, I saw you shake your head, so I didn't know if you wanted to co-sign on that.
No, that's my youngest daughter trying to be a sports broadcaster at 5. So that's no worries.
Yeah, that's great.
Exactly. Well, look, we know who the fill-in is going to be. The next time I got to be out, you guys know where the fill-in is. But yeah, to your point, Tori, as chock full of talent, if you will, as that list was, and of course it started off as 101. That was kind of the title of it. But many of those free agents have since gone, even in the past couple of days. But yeah, when you look down this list, you really don't see a lot in the way of O-linemen, period. I mean, it's Brandon Scherfs and Jedrick Wills, and that's pretty much it. And they're not centers, but to your point, Tori, there's really not a lot on that list, because if we're being honest about it, most teams, if they have a center that works with their QB1, they're going to do whatever they have to do to retain that center, right? And even some, I'm sure, have probably gone to some lengths to make sure they keep their backup center as well, who kind of knows the system. So if there is a Drew Dahlman, Ryan Nuzul situation where a Ryan Nuzul has to step in, or where that second string center has to step in, they have someone who's already familiar with the system. So yeah, that's probably one of those where you're kind of looking over your shoulders like, you're hoping for a solid 17 from Ryan Nuzul, because you're not quite sure what you're going to get necessarily. And you don't want to take those chances with a quote unquote, I'll say quote unquote rookie quarterback, because after 3 starts, this is really still kind of like the advent of your first full season. I wanted to wrap up with this article really quickly, because I thought about the fact that we've heard this from Falcons players for the past couple of years since this list was published. But on the same token, Aaron, I think that it's a wonderful thing, because there's consistency there. And when we talk about the teams that are local, whether that is the Atlanta Falcons, whether that's the Hawks, Braves, United, Dream, etc., we always talk about the appeal, right, of getting top free agents, or the appeal for saying, hey, players don't want to say, hey, I don't want to go there. I don't want to be drafted there. Fix it so that I get drafted elsewhere. You don't hear those conversations in that commentary about the Falcons a lot anymore. And I think a lot of that goes to, in part, how they're doing things like going after a Jesse Bates and being okay paying top dollar, because you really believe he's going to pay dividends. But I also think it's about all of the little things. So let me just give you guys kind of like a tee up. And we've heard this part before, but after home games for, speaking of Jesse Bates III, when he was with the Falcons, he had to just go find his family. Like, I don't know where my family is out there, but ultimately comes to Atlanta, knows that there's a family, his family, in rather a suite at the Benz, and he knows exactly where to get to them and how they are taken care of while he's out there playing the game of football, Chris Lindstrom talked about the same, of course, being one of the NFLPA reps, and just the major impact that it has on players to be able to know that that the franchise of the Falcons, they're not just looking out for the player, but they're looking out for the player holistically. So I just wanted to get you guys' thoughts on that, because the Falcons once again got A's. You have teams like the Bengals and the Vikings, I think, that get F's. And I think those are the kinds of things that matter as you continue, Aaron, to try to attract top free agent talent.
Yeah, and I think you're referring a little bit to like those NFLPA grades and whatnot that we saw at the end of last year. And like, those aren't things that I pay a ton of attention to, but like the one element of it that I think is very telling is sort of like how players interact with the organization and how they feel like their families are treated. And that element, I think, is one of the things that I think definitely stands out when it comes to those NFLPA grades. And so, like, yeah, I do think that it's important for the Falcons, to be a beacon or whatever, if you want to call it that, and sort of be a team that is going to treat its players right. Because, we were having a conversation not too long ago about, how certain longtime Falcon players departed the city and departed on bad terms and whatnot. And you don't want to have, those lingering resentments. You don't want those resentments to be a thing that is a through line throughout their time in Atlanta, as opposed to just like, well, it ended a way that, nobody, I won't say nobody, but very few people break up with a significant other on amiable terms. Some people do, but like most people, it doesn't end well.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know if you know that, T, but
seriously, I didn't know that. Like, I'm best friends with all my exes, but go on.
Yeah, okay. So, like, it oftentimes the
I ain't got nothing.
The breakup.
Sorry, Free, continue.
I don't know why I decided to go down this path. I brought this on myself. But like, the breakup is not always great. Like, you want the relationship to have, you want the time before the breakup to look back at that and say, hey, that was great. That was basically what I wanted to get across. And so, like, sometimes the breakup is not, you don't want the breakup to color the whole thing and then look back at the whole relationship and be like, yeah, it was terrible the whole time. And so, like, the Falcons, at least during the relationship portion, with the relationship between the families and the players and all that stuff, that's the part that you can say, hey, my time in Atlanta was really good. The breakup may not have gone the way that I wanted to go, but that's just life and that sort of thing. So that's my 2 cents on it.
I appreciate that. And because of where you went with that, Free, at first I was going to ask Tori and then Jarvis to wrap us up, but I feel like I should give Jarvis the floor now, because I feel like Tori's going to have to pull it all together at the end and make it make sense. So I'm going to go with Jarvis.
At least it took 58 minutes for us to get to the show before y'all start messing with me.
We did right by you. We did right. But real talk about players watching these things. Like, as you mentioned, Free, this original report came out in February, and then there were some updates to the report this morning that just kind of added some context to it with some conversation and commentary from Chris Lindstrom, in addition to what Jessie Bates had said as well. But the reason I throw that out there too is because it also reset itself, because the Bengals got the lowest score in all of the NFL. Yeah, that same team that's playing games with Trey Hendrickson. And if they don't watch themselves with Shamar Stewart, they're going to have some challenges as well. So on the field, off the field, the types of things you're doing, and you call yourself a franchise in the Bengals, Jarvis, that's trying to get themselves back in championship contention. Well, part of the way you do that is players, top line players, are looking at you holistically and seeing, is that a place that I think I want to go? Whereas you look at a guy like Jessie Bates, who got out of there, is coming to this Falcons franchise, this organization, and who's able to reach out to other players and say, hey, this is the place that you want to be.
Yeah, I think when you look at, and the first thing to come to mind is the Cincinnati Bengals, right? And it's funny that, Jessie Bates used to play for that team, so he kind of understands, that's why I'm sure that's one of the things that he pointed out. Like, so for, when you look at the Trey Hendrickson situation and then not getting paid, being told one thing and the team doing another, like, when you think about, just from as far as players getting paid, I distinctly remember Falcon for life when it came to Julio Jones, and he wants an adjustment to a contract. Okay, we'll give you the adjustment to your contract because the owner said you're going to be a Falcon for life. So I think that when you think about it from that aspect, doing what you say you're going to do financially, that means a lot. And then also being able to take care of your family because, professional football players, it's a 24 type situation. Like it's a year-round thing, as far as taking care of their bodies and making sure they're getting all the rest. Like if the team can take if they have one less thing to worry about from a player standpoint, which is their family, which is very important. Like if the team is willing to take care of that and make sure that give them that comfort, I feel like you're in a space where that is one of those things that is going to be value, and you got to appreciate the Falcons just for that.
Yeah. And Tori, when you look at it from a holistic perspective and what this means as the Falcons continue to go out there and attract top talent, and honestly, Tori, if we're being real about it, even from a draft perspective, because these days some draft picks have the ability to say, I'm not going there. So I think when you hear a report like this, the Falcons are at the top of the food chain. You look at the trickle-down effect at the bottom of a food chain for the Bengals. I think it's a good look for the Falcons that they show as an organization who takes your on the field as well as your off the field seriously.
I think, too, and an example of that is probably the most drastic change is in the weight room as well, with the strength and conditioning staff. And the fact that previously that was a major, major problem. If you're just going off of, the NFLPA report cards, the Falcons had a situation where, let's be real, their strength and conditioning coach was graded F, and was the only one.
I remember that.
And now I think the relationship and the culture that John Griffin and his staff has put into that weight room, which, let's be real, a new weight room goes a long way too. I think it shows that there was significant improvement that needed to be made. And I think just talking to players and talking to Griff and his staff about what they implement with these players and the development plans that they have for them and all of the different technology that they use in order to be able to say, like, hey guys, you're going to feel really good today. You're going to feel pretty sore tomorrow, and we're going to handle that. Like, I don't know. Like, I think that there is something to be said about, we're talking about every aspect of a player's life and ecosphere. Yes. And that was one area that I think the Falcons took an astronomical step just from talking to these players who were here previously and who are still here now. That matters a lot because you think about how much time they spend in that weight room and how much time they're spending on their bodies and how much even making it an environment that players want to go into and knowing that they're going to get the right care. I mean, that's a huge, huge win for the organization, let alone the fact that they have all of these new toys of which to play with.
Yes. Well, we appreciate you guys for stopping by. Obviously, we didn't let Jarvis off the hook. We didn't let Aaron off the hook. So we can't let Tori's hair off the hook because it was a paid actor in our show today by the virtue of the comments saying how diabolically cool her haircut is. So shout out to Tori for the fabulous haircut that wraps up our show. We will see you next time.